Hello and welcome back to another Sunday School lesson. This one is Romans 7:16, Overcome Evil with Good. And I did previously do a partial one of these, which was Eternal Glory that Awaits the Faithful Far Outweighs the Trials of Mortality, dealing with Romans 8 verses in Romans 8, and because it was verses that were special to my grandmother when she was still alive. So, we're going to basically cover everything else in here. So first and foremost, the big lesson taken from this, that the lesson, I used lesson twice there, talks about is that if we follow the Spirit of the Lord, we can overcome sin, and that can prepare us for an inheritance with God. And that's really, very important. It's, we oftentimes just don't know what to do when we're confronted with trials and so on. I mean, we're taught, that most things are quite simple, that it's like either, say no to drugs, things like that are very simple, but when we get into certain situations, it suddenly seems and feels more complicated. And it's very easy for us to be kind of deceived by the trials we are experiencing and so on. But if we, keep the Spirit with us, if we study the Scriptures and keep the Spirit with us, then the Spirit will guide us and help us make the choices that are best for us at that particular circumstances. Sorry, I ran out of breath there. But yes, we can overcome sin. We can make the right choices and repent, overcome sin if we keep the Spirit with us. And as I previously said, it's the glory that waits us does outweigh, the tribulations that we face here. No matter how hard our life is, what we will get if we obey the commandments is by and far so much greater than we can imagine. And so that's always a good lesson to keep in mind, is that it by and far outweighs everything. I'm actually a little bit lost now. I think I got myself turned around a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep going straight. Got a little bit lost in the park there. But, you know what? That wouldn't happen spiritually if I kept the Spirit with me. So it's a material lesson. I'm sticking to that. So in these verses, and Paul uses certain terminologies such as predestination, election, and foreknow, or foreknowledge, when referring to what people are called to do on this earth in our lives. And what that basically means is that the Lord knows that some people are set apart, called to, hold a certain position. That guy just totally walked into my path. We're called by God to hold certain positions and do certain things in this life. That's predestination. Whether we accomplish them or not is down to us. To foreknow is that God knowing who will accept these responsibilities and who will not. And election is just us being called to do those certain things. But Paul also makes a very important point, knowing that it doesn't matter where you came from. You are still ultimately in charge of yourself. And as such, if you choose to follow the Lord and so on, you will receive the same blessings as, say, someone who's born into a church or born into the covenant of the Lord. So it is down to your choice. So if you're born in the covenant but choose to abandon it, you're not better off than someone who is not born in the covenant and never enters into the covenant with God. Likewise, if you're not born into the covenant but you do enter into it, you join the church, you do everything that is asked and required of you, you will receive many, many blessings, far more than someone who's born into it and then doesn't really follow the commandments. So, it's ultimately all down to us, what we do, how we choose to behave. And if we keep the Spirit with us, we'll know what we should do and what we shouldn't do. So, Paul also invites us to all be true saints. Now, there is kind of a misconception. I remember somebody actually asking me this, because The name of the church is the Church of Jesus. Of my church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And somebody asked, "Wait, why do you call yourself saints?" Because in the Catholic Church, to be a saint, you essentially I'm trying to remember requirements. I think you have to have 2 confirmed miracles, possibly 3 confirmed miracles, to be canonized and become a saint in the Catholic religion. So it's a very special honor and calling that's not given to every member of the church. However, Paul does refer to members of the church as saints, and specifically people who are active members of the church and doing what they can to obey the commandments. So yes, everyone can become a saint, according to Paul, and that's what our church believes as well. And, if you become a follower of Jesus Christ and follow the commandments, you can and will become a saint in the gospel. So, yay for us, saints. So, there are a couple more scripture, just very specific scriptures I want to talk about a little bit in these verses. The first one's in Romans 7:23, where it talks about kind of this warring. And there's a specific story that's referred to in the lesson that I'll go ahead and tell you, which is... the way I heard the story originally, it was a grandfather talking to a young man, and basically tells this young man, so inside of you, there are 2 wolves that are constantly warring against each other. The carnal, the sensual-minded wolf is warring against the more spiritual-minded, the more religious, spiritually-minded type wolf. So basically it's the carnal nature of man is constantly warring against the spiritual nature of man. That's inside everyone, and they're pictured as 2 wolves warring against each other. And the young man asked, well, okay, these wolves are warring against each other. Which wolf wins? And the response that the older man gives is very straightforward. He says, whichever wolf you feed will be the one who wins. So if you live your life as a more carnally minded person, then the more carnal-minded wolf will be the one who becomes dominant in you. If you live more spiritually, become more spiritually minded, the more spiritual wolf will be the one who wins. And it's ultimately down to your choices, what you choose to do. Which wolf you feed, essentially, which part of yourself you feed. So, just food for thought there. And so, in Romans 9, he talks about kind of the music of the gospel and so on. And this struck a note inside of me, because I was always, one of the things I was taught, I don't think it's specific to my religion, I don't think it's taught by the religion, I think it was just what somebody thought when I was growing up. But they say that all music exists as a sort of prayer. And so if the music you're listening to isn't a prayer to God, then who is it a prayer to? So, and I think very much so, you should take a look at the music you listen to, not just the gospel music, which, of course, listen to gospel music, listen to, classical music, listen to the music that uplifts you, that makes you feel better, but also listen to what's said in the music. So if the music is uplifting, but the words in it are not uplifting, are actually bringing you down, then the music itself will serve no purpose for you personally. But if the music and the words you listen to are uplifting, then they will elevate you. They will make you a better person. So, yes, by all means, listen to the music of the church, gospel music, sorry, and listen also to, music that uplifts you, that makes you feel good, that makes you feel happy and joyful in your life. If you're listening to music and it makes you feel angry or depressed or just, pumps you up for sporting events, it's probably not doing much for you spiritually. But if there is a good message in your music, and if it makes you joyful and happy, then by all means keep listening to the music. And I think you're the only person who can really look at the music and say, is this music, truly elevating to me, or is it just bringing me down? And it really is. It's down to you. All your choices here. So, let's see. There's a couple of other things I wanted to do. Yes. One of the lessons, it's in Romans 12. It talks about making ourselves a living sacrifice to God, a holy sacrifice acceptable to God. So, what the heck does that mean? I think is the first question that most people will ask about this. How do we make ourselves a sacrifice to God? Why should we make ourselves a sacrifice to God? And these are all valid questions I'm asking. So, first and foremost, what does God ask us to sacrifice? And if you kind of break it down, there's an awful lot that you're asked to do. You're asked to not behave carnally, not behave in the way of the world. You're asked to follow the commandments, which seem very restrictive until you stop following them and realize that you were much happier and much more joyful when you followed the commandments than you were when you didn't follow the commandments. It sounds a bit odd, but commandments, if you perceive commandments as a guide to being happy, then yes, following them will make you happy. Then by all means, they will make you happy. Whereas if you don't follow the commandments, you'll get a temporary, just a very, transitory, I can't think of the right word, a very short period of not even happiness, just, elation, followed by really nothing beyond that. You don't experience any joy or lifelong, joy. Joy is the best word for it. You don't experience that. So, let's take, for example, the following, cleave unto your wife and none other, given to men, or, if you're a woman, cleave unto your husband and no other. Does this make you joyful or happy? Well, let's take someone who has an affair. That provides a temporary enjoyment, temporary pleasure, is gained by having an affair. But in the long run, it does nothing for you. And indeed, it can cost you your entire marriage. Your entire livelihood could be cost. You could lose not just spiritually, the sport of, a loving spouse, but you could also, lose money, you could lose property, you could lose your standing in a community. By, people looking and say, oh, look how he treated his wife, or look how she treated her husband, and suddenly you're less respected in the community. However, if you'd, not given into temptation, not cheated on your spouse, suddenly you have a solid marriage, that has been tested, and that you can, say, I am loyal to this person and no one else. There's the view of the world is that, oh, everybody cheats, so you might as well. But that's not true. There are many, many marriages where both people have remained married for many, many years, and they've been loyal to each other. And that's a more lasting joy, is to have that eternal marriage that comes with it. You have that sort of stability, whereas if you're just flitting from one person to another, you have no real stability. All you have is, a quick temporary happiness followed by very little, by nothing. So yeah, obeying the commandments brings us joy, whereas if we don't obey the commandments, it doesn't bring us joy. So, a sacrifice, one of the definitions that was talked about at church today of sacrifice was, putting aside, basically giving up something in order to get something much greater in return. So in my parable, I suppose you'd call it, a man gives up, having a quick and fun little affair, a very short-term, pleasure for having, an eternal, joyful marriage where he has remained loyal. And, yeah, it may not work out 100% for a person. You may you may be completely loyal and your spouse may not be, and there may be a lot of problems coming forward. It's not going to be easy, but ultimately it is going to be worth it if you obey the commandments and, if you live the gospel. So yeah, that's what it means by, making a sacrifice, and that's why you should do it. It's ultimately going to be for your benefit. So, you see, the commandments aren't there to, they're ultimately for our benefit. They're just, let's just please this God type person. No, they are there ultimately for our benefit, and the ultimate design of them is to bring joy to everyone, to all of us. And that's why we should make ourselves a living sacrifice. Let's see. So, Paul, in Revelations 14, there's a pretty long discussion about judging and arguing about the personal preferences of others. So how do you respond? Oop, I found a tree. So how do you respond when others' choices differ from your own? How can you respond and say, well, that's not my choice, that's not what I would do, but, you're responsible for yourself. Now, for me, at least from my point of view, I very much have a live and let live attitude. And when I see people making choices that are ultimately not good for them, it can make me sad. I also have, because I have this philosophy so ingrained in my head, I can step back and say, yes, but it was their choice. It's not my choice. I'm sorry that, these bad things have happened to these people because of their choices, but it's not my place to criticize them. So, that's essentially my attitude. If somebody says, well, what would you do? I give the answer, but I'm not going to, I'm not that person. I firmly believe that each person is responsible for themselves, and ultimately it's not up to me to judge. So, while I'd say, well, I would do, if asked, I would do some, I wouldn't do that, I would do this, or whatever. And even then, even with that attitude, it can be difficult because, it's very easy to get offended when somebody says, well, yeah, I wouldn't do that. It sounds wrong. Even if they ask you, well, what would you do? And your response is, well, I would do this instead of that. Even that can come off a bit off. So, ooh, wait, whoa, is that? I don't think I've ever seen, talk about, cool blessings. I do not think I have ever seen that bike before in this game. That is so cool. So, yeah, I'm going to count that as just a cool side effect blessing from doing these lessons and doing this game, because I don't think I would have found it otherwise. That is a very neat bike. Anyway, so yeah, it is a challenging question. When somebody's choices are different from our own, what do we do? And how do we respond to that? And if they're making a poor decision, how do we tell them without them being upset or offended by it? And, how do we be supportive of them without supporting the decision if we truly believe they're making a bad decision? And, I have no real answer because I think each situation is different and differs from each other. But I think, if we just take a step back and follow the Spirit, then we'll know what we should do, and we will know how we should do it. So anyway, that's my look at the scriptures, this Sunday school lesson in the scriptures, and the whole Romans thing. So let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.